Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be back here in Chickasha with y'all. It's significantly warmer than the last time we were here, and significantly warmer than it is in Denver. So but we're happy to be here. We're going to be at a camp at Lujo this week, and so I'm thankful for the opportunity y'all gave me to come and visit with y'all. I also want to extend our gratitude for your support of our adventure and our education at Bear Valley. It really means a lot to us that you guys were willing to partner with us on that. And I will let you know, they do teach us how to dress when we preach at Bear Valley, but we stopped to visit my grandma on the way down here, and I left my suit at her house. So we come to you at Walmart's finest. So, but rest assured, they do teach us how to dress properly as preachers. They just haven't taught me how to remember my clothes yet. So if we come back, maybe we'll do better next time. We're taking baby steps. This morning, I have a quote I want to start with, and it's one that some of you may be familiar with. Food is essential for life, therefore make it good. I don't know if that is a familiar quote for any of y'all. If it is, you're probably hungry for chicken right now. This is a quote that's plastered on the wall of many Chick-fil-A's across this country. Lemonade, chicken. That's what I think of when I hear this quote. It's a quote from Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A. And Truett Cathy, many things can be said about him, but one of them was he had a tremendous work ethic. When he got in the restaurant business, he and his brother opened a 24-hour diner. And he and his brother operated that themselves, working 12-hour shifts each. Didn't take a shift off, didn't take a day off. He worked and worked and worked. And that's part of the secret to the success of what became Chick-fil-A is his work ethic and the work ethic he instilled in those that worked for him. But I want to take his philosophy for chicken and lemonade and let's apply it to the church. See if this sits with you a little bit differently. The gospel is essential for life. Therefore, make it good. See, in the church, we all know the gospel, and it's kind of like the difference in philosophy between McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. One of them, you feel guilty for asking somebody to help you, and like, good grief, I can't believe I'm putting these people out by giving them my money and asking them to give me something in return. And then you go somewhere where you feel like, wow, I'm welcomed here. They want my money. They want me to come back and spend more. Now, I'm not saying we need to take the philosophy and make people feel like we want them to come to church and give us money. But we want them to feel wanted, and we want to work, and we want to serve God. If you would, turn with me to Colossians chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 23 and 24, and this may be something that's familiar with many of y'all. Verse 23, it says, whatever you do, I lost my place. Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord, and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You're serving the Lord Christ. When we were working at the camp, this was a verse we started every summer with our staff, saying, remember, everything you do, we're doing it for the Lord. Specifically, when you're working in a religious setting, you're literally working for the Lord in that setting. You're working actively to further his kingdom. But this in everything we do, not just when we're in this building, not just when we're out, with a sign up that says we're from such and such church. Everything you do is for the Lord. And why does this matter? Well, if you'll turn over with me a few pages to James chapter 4, verse 17. It says, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. I think sometimes as Christians, we know the things we should do. We don't always do them. And what I want to look at this morning is what are some steps we can take when we see and we know these things that we should do to help us do them and accomplish them and further the work in God's kingdom. The first thing I think we need to do is we need to acknowledge and we need to know what the job is that needs to be done. Second thing we need to do is we need to make a plan and commit to a plan to accomplish that goal, to accomplish that task. And at the end of it, we need to stop making excuses for not doing it. So I think the most important, one of the more important things to do is we need to understand the job that we're being called to do. Because if you don't know what it is you're doing or, how it needs to be done, it's going to be hard to do God's work if you don't know. As an illustration, 2 or 3 years ago, I bought an old pickup from a friend of mine. And it was a two-tone pickup with a white stripe down the middle of it. And it had a scuff mark down the bed where something had been drugged down the bed of the pickup. And I tried to buff it out. We was trying to make it look nice. And there was still a little residue left on the truck. And so I took it to my friend I bought it from. He had a body shop. And I said, what can we do to make this look a little nicer? And he said, that'll come off easy. He said, put a little lacquer thinner on a rag and you can wipe it right off. Well, okay, so I went in the shop, grabbed a rag, put a little lacquer thinner on there, went out, started wiping on it. It come right off. It was amazing. So I walked back in the shop and to get a little more lacquer thinner on the rag because it dried out. And he said, is it working? And I said, yeah, it works. It's working really good. And he said, I said, I just got to get a little more lacquer thinner on the rag. And he said, is that the rag you're using? And I said, well, yeah. And I looked down and I was holding a bright neon orange microfiber cloth. And he said, don't use a colored rag with lacquer thinner on white paint. And I said, do what? And I went out and looked, and it looked like one of my kids had taken a yellow highlighter and went down the side of my pickup and then tried to smudge it off with their hand. He said, you gotta get a white rag, dude. So I had to go get a white rag, and I had to start all over again at the very beginning and redo the whole thing. Sometimes we do that in the church, don't we? We go off, we get all gung-ho about something, and we just go off half-cocked, and then we look back and we realize, I'm not actually accomplishing what I thought I was accomplishing at all. And we have to start over. We see some biblical examples of that. If you want to turn with me to Acts chapter 18. Verse 24 through 27. Now we see, now a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. See, we see a young man, Apollos, and he is working his fingers to the bone, and he's doing a really good work. But he doesn't fully understand the work that he's supposed to be doing. And the beautiful thing is thankfully he had Priscilla and Aquila there. And I really like the way that this is worded. They more accurately taught him. They didn't take him aside and say, hey, you're doing this wrong. They more accurately taught him. They took what he already had and they built on it. And they were able to correct him and direct him in the right direction. We see in chapter 19 when Paul's in Ephesus, he sees a similar situation. People that only knew the baptism of John. And he directed them, okay, let's start here. Let's complete this. Let's complete this work and do it right. See, we don't have to have a scorched earth approach if we come across something that's wrong. Now, sometimes that's needed, but sometimes just that gentle direction, hey, you're doing great, let's just go. And sometimes we need that ourselves. Now, one of the things, too, is There's more than 2 or 3 jobs at the church. I mean, when you think about it, the work of the church, we've got a few things. We've got preachers. We've got song leaders. We've got thermostat control. And then we've got somebody to clean the bathrooms when we leave Sunday. There's so much more than that. And sometimes we think, well, I don't fit into any of those categories, so there's nothing for me to do. Turn with me to the book of Exodus. In Exodus 31 is where we're gonna hop over to. In Exodus chapter 31, we're going to read verses 1 through 6. The Lord said to Moses, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with ability and intelligence, with knowledge and all craftsmanship, to devise artistic designs, to work in gold, silver, and bronze, in cutting stones for setting and in carving wood, to work in every craft, in cutting stones up. And behold, I have appointed with him Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, and I have given to all able men ability that they may make all that I have commanded you." What's really interesting, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about different people in the Bible. And it's an interesting study, and I haven't gone into it to get the exact numbers, but we see here Bezalel and Aholiab. These are the 2 guys that were kind of, I guess you could call them the foremen over the construction of the tabernacle in the desert. And the guy was talking about these 2 guys, and I think he said they're mentioned like 8 times in the Bible. And then he started listing off people in the Bible that we hear about all the time that are listed fewer times in the Bible than these 2 craftsmen that helped build the tabernacle. It was really interesting to me. One of them, I believe, Nathan the prophet that goes and chastises David, is mentioned in the Bible fewer times than these 2 guys. But all of us know who Nathan is, but we don't necessarily know who these 2 guys are. And they built the tabernacle. We think about that, about the tabernacle and how grand it was and the purpose it served. But most of us probably don't even know the names of the guys that built it. See, my point in all this is you don't have to preach. You don't have to lead singing. You don't have to control the thermostat. There's to be important to God's work. We're all given something that we can do for the kingdom, because there's a whole lot out there that needs done. Of course, we need God's instructions. But Bezalel and Aholiab couldn't have done anything without the plan God gave them. And neither can we. We need to find out, so this is the work God's calling me to do. How are we going to go about doing this? In 2 Timothy 2:15, and I'm going to read this to you from the King James because I think it's how I'm most familiar with it, and most of y'all may be too. "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." In some of your like the English Standard Translation, it translates that, "Do your best to present yourself to God." The NASB says, "Be diligent to present yourself." What all of these show to us is we don't just go off without a plan. We don't just say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to ask questions later and see if we did the right thing. We need to plan. Back to my old pickup. At one point, when I owned it, I had to put a new set of headlights in it. And it was kind of a pain. And so I talked to my buddy at the body shop again. I said, hey, I need to put headlights in the pickup. He ordered me a set. And I said, well, I've seen online that you can do it this way. And he said, don't do it that way. He said, just, if you want to do it that way, I'll go ahead and order a grill for the pickup because you're going to tear the grill up doing that. Okay. So, man, I really did. I did a bunch of research online. I talked to him and made sure I fully understood what I was going to do. I didn't want to have to buy a grill for this thing. That was going to be expensive. I was already buying headlights. And when I put the headlights in the pickup, it took about half the time that I thought it would. Why was that? It's because I planned. I knew ahead. I knew these are the tools I need. These are the steps I need to take. And it went off without a hitch. We didn't have to go back and redo it later. It was magnificent. It was amazing what having a plan did for that. Sometimes we think the plan just means we're just going to study the Word. We're going to read the Bible. We're going to read the Bible. That's going to give us the plan. And that's a good place to start. But we see an example from Paul again. When Paul was on his missionary journeys, do we see in the New Testament that Paul just had a manuscript that when he got there, he showed up, he pulled out his manuscript and he read it, and okay, this worked in Corinth, so we're going to do it in Ephesus because it worked there. No. We see Paul, and the best example of that is when he goes to Athens. He tailors his message, he tailors his plan to the people he is addressing, to the work, the specific work he's doing that day. To use a term that might ruffle feathers, Paul didn't have a tradition that he used. He had a truth that he preached, and he preached that truth in whatever way was going to reach the people he was going to preach to. He didn't change. When Paul went to Athens, he didn't preach or change the gospel he preached. He changed his approach. He changed his plan so he could be successful. In Luke 14:28, we see the parable of the man building a tower. And Jesus says a man's going to build a tower. Does he not first sit down, count the cost, and make sure he has what he needs to finish it? Otherwise, he ends up with a half-finished tower, and everybody says, look at this guy. He started a tower, and he couldn't finish it. He also says if you're going to go to a battle with your enemy, do you not first sit down and say, do we have the forces we need with 10,000 to conquer our enemy with 20,000? I think that's a really good example for what we're doing in the church. We're at war with an enemy, and we are outnumbered. Let's make sure that when we go out to fight, we have done everything to do to prepare ourselves for success. We need a plan. We need to understand what we're doing and the plan to accomplish it. And the last point, and this is one that I think is especially important, and I know it's especially relevant to myself, is we've got to quit making excuses. We've got to quit making excuses in the church. So the old pickup I had, shortly after I bought it, I had to reseal the timing cover on it because it had a water leak. Somebody at some point in the truck's life, they had failed to plan and didn't understand the job of changing the water pump because they left bolts out. I mean, there were parts missing. Timing cover started leaking, so I had to pull all that apart, reseal it, go to my buddy, the body shop buddy, go out to his junkyard, pull some hardware off of an old motor so I could put this thing back together right. And when I did it, I thought, you know, I've got it apart. I should probably put a new water pump on this pickup just to make sure I don't have problems later on. But then I told myself, well, it's obviously had the water pump replaced because the bolts are missing out of it. So somebody's replaced the water pump. And that was $40. And I said, you know, we've got a water pump that it works now. So we spent $40 on a seat cover instead and said, we're going to throw it together. It's going to be fine. A few months later, it started leaking. You probably saw that coming. Many of y'all have probably done similar things. A few months later, it starts leaking. Hey, you know what? No big deal. We can pour some water in it every couple of weeks. That ain't no problem. We're not going to change it. We don't have to spend that $40 and that 2 or 3 hours right now. We're just going to keep patching this thing along. The problem was we got in the middle of our camp season. And once camp started, there's no time to change a water pump on a pickup. You're just going to have to sit. One day I had to take my daughter to a dentist appointment, and of course, we were running late, didn't get left on time, and I said, I just put water in it last week. We don't need to check that again. And we got about 5 miles down the road and overheated the pickup. Had to limp it home. That's pretty much where my examples with the pickup end, because that's pretty much where life ended with me. We ended up selling an old Ford pickup that needed a motor after that. All because I didn't want to take 2 or 3 hours and spend $40 to fix it right. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But how many times in the church do we have things like that where we say, well, I mean, it's going to take a little bit of money. Somebody's going to have to put forth some effort. Let's let it go. The problem is, it's not pickups we're overheating when we do that. It's souls. We see a lot of people in the Bible that had excuses. And I want to bring up James 4 again, where it says, whoever knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, to him it's sin. See, that's what our excuses do. We know the right thing to do, we don't do it. Turn with me to Judges chapter 6. And we're going to talk about some excuses in the Bible. Judges chapter 6, verse 12. We see a man named Gideon. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." And Gideon said to him, "Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? And where are all of his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hands of Midian." And the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Did I not send you?" And he said to him, "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least of my father's house." And the Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man." To give you a quick interpretation of what Gideon just said, he's addressed as a mighty man of valor. He's told, "You will save Israel." And his response to the angel of the Lord is, "You got the wrong guy. You are looking," what he in essence says is, "You are looking at the least important man of fighting age in the nation of Israel." When it comes to, we hear a lot in monarchies about the power, the order to the throne, and, well, I'm 17th in line to the throne, and in the United States we have that with the president and the vice president, and there's an order in which if people continue to die in the presidency, that the next president is automatically selected. What Gideon essentially is saying is, the only way I will be of any importance and value in Israel is if I am the last man alive. And you're calling me a mighty man of valor. You're telling me I'm going to lead the Israelites? Yeah. By the time I'm a leader, there won't be anybody to lead. But God says, "No, I'm going with you. I'm sending you." Some of us may have heard the old cliche, "Me and God, we make a majority." And we all say that. If you don't, now you're going to start thinking it because I put it in your head. But do we actually live that, hey, me and God, we're a majority? Gideon, he finally came to realize that. And what Gideon does is he understands, I'm to save the people of Midian, or to save the people of Israel from Midian. And guess what he does? He puts a plan in place. He says, "God, I'll do this, but I need some help along the way." And that's where we see where he throws out the fleece. And he tests God. He wants to make sure. See, in our work as Christians, in our work for the kingdom of God, it's not a sin to say, "God, I'm willing to follow you, but I need some proof. I need some help along the way." See, Gideon's not telling God no. He's accepting that God has something, but he just wants to be sure that he really is doing what God is leading him to do. That's not making excuses. That's saying, "God, let's do this, but let's make sure we're together on this." In 1 Samuel 17, we see another person who had who, in our eyes, had legitimate excuses. We see David. He comes to a war zone to bring food to his brothers. And he hears Goliath, the giant, threatening the people of God, bad-mouthing Israel, bad-mouthing their God. We see David, who most likely is not of fighting age because he's not at war. We see David, who physically is not big enough to even be properly outfitted for war. We see that they try to put the armor on him. It's too big. He can't move. And he says, no, that's not the plan. David had a plan in place. You know, we see he went to the brook. He picked up the 5 stones, and he went and faced the giant. You see, David, even though he had excuses, he didn't use them. David made a plan, and he executed the plan and a giant at the same time. And that brings up a little sidebar I want y'all to think about too. See, sometimes we're looking for these big, miraculous things for God to do in our life. And we think, well, since there's no big, huge aha moment, well, God must not be working. But I want you to think about the idea of little miracles. And we all learn the story of David and Goliath. Is the miracle that David threw a rock and killed a giant? I want you to think about this, and especially when it comes to making excuses. When in the book of Numbers, when the children of Israel are numbered, they're numbering the army. And one of the specific groups numbered in the Israelite army was Benjamites who were left-handed slingers, which meant they were left-handed and they were proficient in using a sling. The same thing David used to kill Goliath. See, a sling was actually a weapon of war. So I want you to think about this. Is the miracle that somehow David shows up and a giant dies? Or is the miracle the fact that God had been working through David his entire life to equip him in proficiency with the one weapon that would allow him to face a giant and be successful? Sometimes the miracle is the things we're doing every day that we don't realize. And we don't realize that those everyday actions we're taking are God putting us in the right place to be the one person to do the right thing, to bring victory for his kingdom. Something else to look at with the excuses. We know Saul's the king when this happens. And we know previously in the book of 1 Samuel, the Israelites had come to Samuel and asked for a king. And we just studied 1 Samuel in class this last quarter, and I'd never thought about things this way until it was pointed out. In 1 Samuel 9, you read about Saul. And what do you read about Saul? He was the most handsome man in the land. He stood a head above everyone else. He was, from all what we can figure, he came from a wealthy family. Saul checked all of the boxes for a worldly leader. Good looking, big guy, great warrior, good family. And he was an absolute train wreck as a king, as a ruler. And then you put that against David, and what do we see when they talk about David? Samuel is specifically told God looks at the heart. And we are told David was a man after God's own heart. And our instructor, the thing he pointed out is, look at this. You have a stark comparison here. You have the king the people chose, and you have the king that God chose. Now, David wasn't perfect by any means. He had his flaws, but he was a sight better than the king the people chose. Sometimes we think in humanly terms, and we say, well, I would never be the person people would pick for that. Well, yeah, but we've seen where God took the least important person in Israel and saved the nation. We see where he took a kid who was a shepherd, and he slew a giant with him. We see that same kid become the ruler God chose. Not because people chose him, but because God chose him. The last example of someone with excuses I want to look at this morning is one of my favorites, and that's going to be in Joshua chapter 14.